And it looks like Indonesia is going to get incredibly wet along with Myanmar. Now that's just interesting because Myanmar only uses half of its food growing area. Myanmar produced more rice in the 1960s than China did. It was the breadbasket of Asia. And currently they're only farming half of it.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time, cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David Dubine.
And the same with Indonesia. There's so much land and so much area that could be brought online. And this goes back into, what Lee and I are talking about today. It seems doom and gloomish that your lives are going to change, our societies are being reset, and they are. But that's not the doom and the gloom. That's actually your opportunity moving forward. Because just as I've been talking about, if Indonesia brings on a plethora of new food growing areas across the island chain, there's going to have to be new shipping, new logistics, new ports, new routes, new factories, new facilities for, drying, processing, storage, whatever it is. There's an enormous opportunity out here as things shift from the old paradigm into the new paradigm. And if you're stuck in the fear mode, I'm sorry, you're looking in the wrong direction. You need to be looking at where you can find the niche, find the opportunity, grow that out, stay with the changes, and prosper during this time by helping other people. That's the whole reason I'm doing my channel. That's the whole reason Lee's spending 2 hours with us today is you need to discuss the problem first. Once you know what the problem is, it's very easy to find a solution. No, I'm not an engineer, but if any engineers are out there, I'm sure you have a solution to something that you've seen a problem for a long while, but you just didn't have either the impetus behind you, the funding, or the corporate go-ahead, but now that's possible. And when we really look into history, you start to see that every time these grand solar minimums occur, there's always massive, massive increases in terms of jumps of technology, because people just had to figure out different ways to still survive. Global trade routes, 1600s really came into their own after the 1700s, 1800s. Really, it was a push for global, searching for new grow zones or new areas that could, bring in things to try to alleviate the troubles in Europe during the 1600s. You don't think, why was Portugal out exploring everywhere? Why was the UK out there? England at the time? Why was Spain running across the planet? All these times coincide with these massive explorations, including Zheng He with the Chinese explorer. They always seem to coincide coming into a grand solar minimum for some reason. It's not usually going out of a grand solar minimum, but look through history and see when the most wide exploration of our planet is taking place. And this goes back to the Roman Empire too. When you go back, you start to take a look at, say, circa 400 BC, there was a massive push for expansion of the Roman Empire, not north, west and south. What were they going to look for down there? You just start to see this again and again, where all these opportunities are presented in front of us during this time. This is the point I would need you to take away from today. The danger is there, but also is the opportunity. But you need to understand where we're going with it, especially in the timeline. Like Lee and I, we could just say all these things are coming, but unless we put an actual date on it, or movement out into it on amplification, you won't really have a grand idea of when it's coming up.
And if you thought changes like these were limited to today's world, the fate of Rome, climate, disease, and the end of an empire. This book is a sweeping new history of how climate change and disease helped bring down the Roman Empire, an interweaving grand historical narrative with climate science, The fate of Rome was decided not by emperors, soldiers, and barbarians, but also volcanic eruptions, solar cycles, climate instability, and devastating viruses. From Rome's pinnacle in the 2nd century, when the empire seemed invincible as a superpower, to its unraveling by the 7th century, when Rome was politically fragmented and resource depleted. Empire could no longer withstand the combined challenges of a grand solar minimum and recurrent outbreaks of bubonic plague. And if you want to support this broadcast, click the link below in the description box to The Fate of Rome, Climate, Disease, and the End of an Empire, available in both paperback and Kindle versions. Your clicks keep this broadcast on air. Thanks for the support.
Now, I'll just touch off with one last point here. Lee, you talked about the smaller particulates in the atmosphere, water droplets and particles. You know, over here on SOT.net, they have this great anti-solar arc captured on film during takeoff in Sweden. It looks like a Z-pinch off our atmosphere, but in water droplet. It looks like what you'd see one of the halos in the sky, but it's a Z-pinch formation. Elusive anti-solar arc captured on film during takeoff in Sweden. This is definitely an atmospheric anomaly that has something to do with reflective particles. And the amount of what we would consider sundogs or halos, 22-degree halos, these are absolutely increasing. Everywhere you look across the atmosphere, there's strange, colorations in the clouds. A lot of people say it's from geoengineering. I can't really believe that there's that much up there. A lot of people are saying it's from nanometals changing it, but I really believe that it's something more to do with moisture and water vapor than anything else. I agree that there is a geoengineering program going on. I see the sky trails all over the place. But again, we come back to cosmic rays, and you're talking about cloud nucleation and all these different changes happening in the atmosphere that are visible, not only to the naked eye, but now add a vapor trail from an aircraft through that same medium that we're looking at. Then what happens? So these sundogs, this new solar arc, and all these trails we're seeing across the sky, some of them could be geoengineering, because I've seen a couple that have come out, they're black on the end. They look like it's almost like carbon black coming out of the back. Now that one or two, I could actually say something. I don't think it's sun reflective particles up there. I think it's something coming out of the aircraft itself. Otherwise, just so many of these things going across, we can see them visibly. And I know you like to talk about that, Lee, so I'll let you go.
Well, if it's black coming out of the exhaust, more than likely it's a Russian military aircraft. They're famous for that. Their commercial aircraft aren't much better. The amount of geoengineering as far as cloud nucleation taking place by governments around the world is not nearly as prolific as some people may think, although there are some countries that are huge in it, like China. So, China has thousands of people, aircraft, artillery launchers. They do all kinds of things to make rain, and they are producing new plants to put aerosols up to increase crop yield over parts of their territory. So, there are a lot of people who are concerned with what they are doing. There are other countries who are doing some of that. As far as the colors in the atmosphere, we're going to see a lot of changes in the atmosphere because cosmic rays are creating more of this cloud nucleation, and it's doing it at higher altitudes, and the light is refracting differently as it comes through our atmosphere and is going to give us more of these magentas and purples and so on and so forth in the sunsets. So you can be looking forward to a lot more of this color that we see in the evenings, and layers of clouds that the sun comes through, and refractions of the sun shining through layers of clouds, so as that it looks like the sun is setting in the northeast as well as the southeast, as well as what you see going down in the west. In fact, right after sunset, it can look just as bright in the northeast and the southeast as it does in the west. There's a lot more of this to come with the lightning on top of that, the cloud formations that we're going to see, the formation of those clouds as more of these particles coming into our atmosphere. We're going to see a lot more atmospheric compression events, a lot more flood events, a lot more of the hail, deeper hail than what we've already seen, which we've already seen, I think, as much as a meter of hail. There's going to be a large amount of changes in basically all phases of the weather and that talks about the jet streams, where it's warm, where it's cool, the amount of rain you get, the type of rain you get, how the storms come through, the direction of the prevailing winds. All of that is going to be changing basically anywhere above 20 degrees latitude going up towards the poles. So above 20 degrees latitude, your weather is going to change. And you can expect anywhere from 20 degrees latitude north that you're going to see a temperature drop of your average temperature. Could be anywhere from as little as just 1 degree Fahrenheit to, in some regions, it could be as high as 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And when you talk about what the temperature, average temperature of 10 degrees Fahrenheit will do to the growing season of the majority of the breadbasket of the United States, or any country for that matter, it's going to be extremely detrimental. And then you had also mentioned about, new roadways and new ports and all that other stuff. And I had talked earlier about Russia. And I'm glad that you mentioned new roadways, because very recently Vladimir Putin himself got in the front of a brand new Russian truck and drove across the massive 7,000 pylon bridge that Russia built to Crimea, because Crimea is a breadbasket, and now they can pillage that directly into Russia without having to go through Ukraine at all. And so that is a prime example of what governments around the world are doing to prepare for this. The Russians in the May Day parade had more snow buggies and more autonomous aircraft and all kinds of vehicles that were painted up in Arctic camouflage. So they are still preparing. They are still bringing, lots of money to the table for development. We've talked about they're putting nuclear reactors on barges so as that they can move and put power anywhere they want, anytime they want. They're preparing so as that if there is a Carrington event and they want to put power in a city, all they got to do is push a barge up and tie into the grid, and ta-da, they got a nuclear reactor right there powering that city in case of, a Carrington event or whatever else happens. Or it gets so cold that they need additional power to be able to maintain the electrical demand of their region, which they have already started to see. Their electrical demand has spiked in some of their regions this year, and it did it a little bit last year, but it's been much worse this year. Same thing's going to happen with the United States and other countries. The demand is going to be much, much more than what anybody expects, because of the fact that houses that are built closer to the equator do not have the same insulation requirements of houses that are built in cooler regions of the country or the continents. And so as the cold weather progresses further south, when it comes to heating those structures, the heating systems will not be able to keep up, and there is very little insulation on them, and the majority of those are heated by electricity. So the demand is going to go through the roof. So in the coming years, and when I'm saying coming years, I'm talking about only the next few years, we will see a dramatic increase in the demand for electricity in the United States and other countries around the world. We'll see more people who are freezing, more people who can't get crops to come up, more people who are starving, more floods. It's only going to get worse. And like you were talking about with China and putting in the railroads, and now they have teams of men that can build a railroad station in 8 hours, a complete depot. So they already have the plans in place. They already know where they're going to put their stuff. They've already laid the rail lines to nowhere right now, but that'll be the China Express bringing agricultural products out and trying to feed their population over in China, and they're doing anything and everything they can. They know what's coming. They have the history. So they have been preparing. They are preparing. They will continue to prepare. Between China and Russia, they are going at it as hard as they can. I don't know that either one of those countries could be doing anything more than they are already. It's every facet of it that you look at, their aircraft, the number of icebreakers that Russia's building. They're building 13 new icebreakers as we speak. The United States only has like 3 big ones, and one's in for repair. So they're building their snow buggies. They're putting their people underground. They're training with their population to be able to move them very quickly underground, show them where all the supplies are, and getting all of their people oriented for this type of an event. In other countries like the United States are doing basically nothing. So it's up to us as individuals to do something, because, there is not going to be a guy knocking at your front door going, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. That isn't going to happen. This is way bigger than all of the governments in the world combined. So we all need to take, our own steps to do whatever we can do to prepare. And you were talking about, things of opportunities for people to do. If I were 20 or 30 years younger, I would get into doing aeromotor windmill repair, specifically aeromotor, because they're all over the country and all over the world. They are a very durable and lasting machine. And in the future, getting water out of the ground for people to drink will be a number one priority. And having the knowledge to be able to take an old aeromotor windmill and repair it, install it, build it new, or what have you, will be an extremely invaluable knowledge, and something you will be able to use anywhere and everywhere you go, because in the United States and in many other countries, there are still a lot of places that pump water with old windmills, and new windmills are being sold every single day. They're going up regularly. I just spoke with a gentleman the other day about it. He just got done installing a bunch here in Florida just 2 weeks ago. That is a trade that I would recommend that people learn about. So wind for power, wind for pumping water, wind for pumping air for underground facilities, because, we talk about the underground facilities, the domums. What is it? I forget the name of that, Dave. The stone structures that people...
Yeah, dolmens.
Dolmens, yes.
Yeah, Lee, can you also go a little more in depth, like to aeromotor? Can you explain? I know you lost a few people there because they're just thinking windmills that make electricity. So can you explain the difference between
the
turbine mills and then an aeromotor windmill?
Anything that sticks up and is a windmill and it looks sleek generates electricity. Anything that sticks up and it's old-timey, like a windmill that you saw back in Western days that were out on the prairie, and they got the fan thing sticking off the back, the blade sticking off the back with the big fans going around, and it looks like an oil derrick underneath of it. 99.9% of those are pumping water. And that was for cattle or for the railroad, so as that the steam trains could go up and down, because they had to get water all the time to, make steam for their boilers, or for, make steam in the boiler for the train to operate. So that is an old-timey windmill that uses a plunger system that goes up and down and has basically two rubber diaphragms inside of a pipe. And a small one can, move a quart or two every single stroke. And a giant one can move, maybe 100 gallons every single stroke. That is a great way to get water out of the ground. You can then use that same pumping system from that windmill to put that into an elevated tank. And water for every basically 2 feet of altitude that you have, you get 1 pound of pressure. So if your windmill is pumping it up into a tank that's on a hill above your home, you can actually have full water pressure in your house, just like you do right now, off gravity feed from that tank if your supply line is large enough. Then you've got enough elevation above your house. So if the top of that water tank is 60 feet above you and you've got a decent supply line coming to your house, you have 30 pounds of water pressure in your shower, which is pretty nice. These are the things that people can incorporate when they, build their future home, or if they've got a well now. And the great part about it is people say, the wind doesn't blow all the time. Well, that's great. I got a 3,000 gallon water tank. That'll last me a month. So how much do I need? The wind blows pretty regularly no matter where you're at. So, and it doesn't take a whole lot. You can determine your well depth. This won't do a real deep well. Now, this is, it's not something that, if you get a really deep well, you're not going to get a lot of water out of a wind type of pump. But if you're under 300 feet in your well, it's a very viable option, and you can use the extra water for irrigation or giving water to your neighbors or whatever. But I highly recommend an aeromotor, specifically. Windmill works, then get one. You don't need a big one. Just get one and put it on your property if you have a well. It's number one advice I have for every property owner within the sound of my voice. Get an aero motor and put it on your property. You will not regret it.
TrueLeafMarket.com. I really want to talk about growing your own food, which will be a necessity moving forward. There's so many ways that we can go about growing different types of vegetables that we're going to need. Microgreens are incredibly nutritious. They're super fast to grow. In less than a week, you can have something that you can eat. Also, sprouts. We can get those a little bit taller, a little more dense, a little bit larger volume on the vegetation mass coming off of there. So how do you know what kind of sprouts to grow? How about wheatgrass or herbs? What about different types of herbs that we can add to our foods? Now, what I just described to you, there's a full range of starter guides there at TrueLeafMarket.com for you to take a look at. Even if it's just for your own knowledge and you don't purchase something from them, at least get the information so you know how to grow microgreens, you know how to grow sprouts, you understand what some of the herbs are for. TrueLeafMarket.com. Use the link below and give yourself the gift of organic and heirloom seeds.
For example, we've got numerous wells here. We have power ran to each one of those, and we have to pay a monthly fee just for that electric meter to be there, plus the power that's coming out. Whereas that if we were to do a larger investment, put the windmill there and a storage tank, then we would always have pressure on the entire system, and it's always done by gravity and wind. And then you can eliminate that monthly fee and put that towards the purchase of the windmill. So, that's the type of things that we as people who are planning to, thrive in the future need to be thinking about is things that are robust, things that don't require a lot of technology. Because even with a report that, just came out from NASA, we're overdue for another Carrington type event. And, they have a cycle and we're due for that cycle. And so there's a high probability of an event like that. And should such an event transpire, the effects of that on the population of the planet would be, in most cases and in most countries, catastrophic. More than likely, a lot of the population would lose electricity and their ability to get fresh drinking water. Thus, a windmill is a wonderful thing to do that for you. Additionally, these types of windmills also have a hand pump capability, so as that if the wind isn't blowing, you can still go up and pump water out of it. So, that's my little thing on technology. The last little part of it would be also learn how to do wind turbines to be able to generate electricity, preferably in 12 volts. That's the voltage that I'm recommending everybody for a survival or pioneering attitude, is to address all of their electronics around a 12 volt system, because that allows you a wide variety of different diverse technologies that you can incorporate on a 12 volt battery system. Whereas if you use 24 or 48 or something of that nature, you would have to have reducers and all kinds of things, voltage dividers to bring that voltage back down, which wastes electricity. So 12 volts is what I recommend for wind turbines or any power source. All right, back to you, Dave.
Yeah, there's a lot of repair parts on a 12-volt system. I mean, you could scrape anything from almost anywhere because it's all across. I don't care what country you go to or what continent, everything's still 12 volts. So even around the world, you're kind of looking at the same plug-and-play repair parts on there. So once you understand the systems and how to work those, then I think that 12-volt is the way to go as well. We talked about that a couple times. Russia's getting ready, and China's definitely getting ready. And there's a few other countries as well that are seeing the changes coming, and they're trying to get ready for the citizens. I don't know if it is with the U.S. that they understand this New Madrid fault zone is going to go off again, that whatever they do, even with preparations, that it just won't matter, because when the New Madrid goes off, there'll be so much destruction that goes on with all the pipes and the bridges and the electrical grid and everything. But the country's going to be separated into two parts anyway. Once this event happens, a lot of people are pegging right around 2024, 2023 for this thing to go off. I've had several people show me some research that shows 2023 or 2024 is when the expected date of this New Madrid fault slip is going to happen again. So it's just kind of unusual that the U.S. isn't preparing when we have a lot of resources, and Canada is not doing much either, because I just believe they understand that that's going to be an uninhabitable zone, and they're not even trying to do anything just because it would be a moot point. You talk about drawdown on the electrical grids. You saw what happened in Canada last year. The drawdown on the grid in Saskatchewan was so heavy, as well as Alberta, that they had to start rerouting power from different provinces to try to make up, because it was all-time power draw. And then you saw in the UK during that super freeze 1.0 and 2.0, the UK maxed out as well. It hit its all-time record power consumption. Now, it's just weird that two countries hit their all-time record power consumption this last year when it got really cold, or I should say this winter when it got really cold, not even last year. So these changes are upon us, and we can start to see them. Now, what happens next year or even in 2 years when it gets a little bit cooler and the cold lasts for even longer? So it's not about the temperatures are going to be so much cooler. It's just these events are going to be prolonged compared to what they are these days. And when I say these days, they're strange anyway, comparatively. So every year we move down this timeline into 2022, 2021, when we get these first massive crop losses. And there's going to be a lot of changes coming up in our society, as well as population migration. You know, you talked about Russian icebreakers, Lee, but a lot of those are nuclear-powered Russian icebreakers, so they obviously understand, as you were talking about in the beginning of the show, when New York Harbor freezes over, you're going to have a constant, continuous ship movement. Now, if you can't get to a refueling spot, that icebreaker suddenly becomes stuck in ice. So, I mean, they're really planning things out for the future. They're not even planning on using, diesel or maritime fuels to power these vessels. They're just going straight nuclear icebreakers. I mean, what are they seeing in the future that's not being told to us or led down? I don't know.
This video is brought to you by our friends at TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet.